really talking about the operational stuff, right? I mean, Hamas got their support, got their planning, their training, all of those things from outside Gaza. And clearly they are a pawn in a much bigger game, if I can put it like that. Jason, I'd like to get your view on that. Who are the main players, in your opinion?
Well, obviously, what's occurred in Israel is incredibly bad, and it's tragic what's occurred. But worse is that we see the countries such as Iran, which is obviously backing Hamas. It's armed Hamas historically. It is one country that's trying to take advantage of this and seeing the overall destabilization of the region. I completely agree with Dakota that many of these people view themselves as martyrs and are willing to die for this, which makes it very difficult to work with them. They're not looking for a logical outcome. And that being said, I think another country that's gained from this is obviously Russia. Russia has distracted from Ukraine, but more importantly, look at what happened the day after the attack on Sunday. There was attacks by Killnet, which is a Kremlin-linked hacking network that took down the government of Israel's websites. There's also other cyber attacks committed by Russia because they took credit for it, so it's not a question. They put it on Telegram. More to that, the Arab League was invited to Moscow. Also, over the weekend, on Monday, they had meetings in Moscow. The head of the Palestinian Authority, or the president of it, Abbas, was invited to Moscow on Monday evening. We see that Russia has done its part to reach out and to further stoke tensions by reaching out to its Arab partners. And I do see that they are trying to use this tragedy in Israel in order to further destabilize the Middle East, something that was to their interest because they do hope it distracts the West from other things that are occurring, such as Taiwan or what came out today, that North Korea has been trading weapons with Russia for a period of time, and the satellite images today show that. So Russia is hoping to distract from these other serious incidences around the world through what is occurring in Israel.
Jason, so you're in the States at the moment. What are you hearing in the corridors of power, on the streets, wherever, the media? What are you hearing about what people are thinking about support for Israel in parallel to support for Ukraine?
Well, in the U.S. at the moment, obviously that is a top issue. As the U.S. still has not selected its next Speaker of the House, a lot's being put on hold. And I think that's probably the top story, actually, of what's going on, because that will decide the future, what's brought to the floor for a vote or not, whether it's aid for Israel, Ukraine, or anything else. That is quite important. So we are waiting for that. That being all said, I think that the vast majority of people understand that we must absolutely help Israel. There's no doubt about that. That is America's interest. It is also America's interest to continue assisting the Ukrainians, where not one American soldier has died, yet for 3.5% of the defense budget, or 0.3% of the total U.S. budget, more than 50% of the Russian military has been destroyed. This is something that operates in our interest. Russia is cooperating with Iran. That's no secret. Look at the Iranian drones have been used inside of Ukraine for over a year. Some of those drones and technologies were tested in Ukraine, were also used in the attack on Israel. The fact that North Korea is now working with Russia in supplying of weapons, that should worry everybody, because North Korea is a real threat to South Korea and to Japan. There is a lot going on here nefariously that Russia is participating in, and this is something that is obviously in the U.S.'s interest to defeat. So I think the vast majority of Americans, and polling does show that the vast majority of Americans have a very negative view of Russia, as they do of terrorists. And so I think trying to defeat both is something that's globally, obviously, in America's best interest.
How seriously, how impactful is this going to be? We almost had a government shutdown on funding issues for Ukraine. Jason, how do you see this playing out?
I think that ultimately, as I said, and I agree, by the way, there's been mismanagement in the past, the way that Congress has decided to reduce the military over the years. Dakota's absolutely right about that. That being said, there is not a problem at this point giving weapons to Ukraine and to Israel, especially in the context of the fact that we know that if things worsen, if Russia feels a victory, if Iran feels a victory, this is something that will only embolden them. There's a reason that Taiwan is supportive of Ukraine. They know it's in Taiwan's interest to ward off China. And so it is in the U.S., it's much, much cheaper for us to invest in other countries that are doing the fighting, to give them the support necessary, our allies, so that they can best defend themselves, because it makes America safer. If we can keep American soldiers out of something, that's the best investment we can make. And so ultimately, I think that this will work out. Unfortunately, it is quite fractious on the Republican side, and it's been quite difficult for the last couple of weeks. That being said, I do think it will work out, and other issues domestically will be addressed, as they must be, such as what's going on the border. It is a very legitimate concern, and it should be addressed. But it does not mean it's not, this or that. Yes, U.S. debt is large, and there's a lot of other problems, but it does not change the fact that currently Russia is feeling expansive and is going to continue to pose a threat not only to Ukraine, which is just one country, but to many countries, including the NATO alliance. And if there were to be a conflict with the NATO alliance, that would be incredibly more complicated and expensive for America, including costing American lives.
What impact, Jason, do you think this line of thinking is going to have on the elections next year?
I think in the primaries, it'll probably play a role. When it gets closer to general election, it'll play less of a role, just because the U.S. is still very committed to what's happening internationally. And there's another factor to this, which is that as the situation worsens, for instance, in the Middle East, there will be more U.S. attention on international issues. At present, the domestic issues are always going to be the top issue in the U.S. for the average voter as to what motivates them. Ultimately, people vote with their checkbook. They vote based upon what is in their own financial interest. And that's why I think that, the polling does show once Americans realize that it's only 3.5% of the military budget, or it'd be the equivalent, we just mentioned the national debt, 0.19% of the national debt would be paid off if we stop funding Ukraine or we cut back all the money from Ukraine to pay back national debt. It doesn't affect it. I mean, all these things that it's going to somehow impact the average American financially is just simply not true. What we see is quite the opposite, that we've done the analysis of what it would cost if Russia were to take Ukraine and be emboldened and to take other territory. And a war with NATO would be very bad. I mean, extremely expensive. And it wouldn't be these sorts of numbers. The numbers are tens of times larger. And so I think that, anything could play out in the next months. But if we continue, and I agree that Biden has to do a much better job of explaining to Congress and explaining to the American people what is occurring with their tax dollars, why this is an investment. This is not giving away money. I mean, the U.S. is going to rebuild Ukraine, and those contracts will go to American companies. A lot of the money that we've given to Ukraine is actually not money. It's decommissioning of weapons. It would have cost more money to decommission those weapons than it has cost to just give them to Ukraine. Right. We're not just going and ordering tons of stuff. So this is, in fact, quite a bit different. And I think that's probably just a problem of messaging. If the average American realized how very cheap this is in the grand scheme for the return on investment it's gotten, by far, it's the greatest investment in American national security history.